Hello ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher, and we have some fresh Battle for Azeroth information. A lot of you have been asking us, like, why aren't you making a ton of videos? I don't think they released that much info, honestly. They kept it pretty much under their hat, whether that was because they knew Classic would dominate the conversation, or that they just not ready to give real specific stuff yet. I think that's probably the case, is they don't want to give too much specifics out now, this early on in the cycle of the creation of Battle for Azeroth. So they gave us some sort of tidbits, little bits of information, a couple of new features that are definitely going to be in there, but even those features weren't fleshed out completely. As much as they showed them off, there was still a lot of questions to be asked. Now, we are getting a lot of the interviews, and I do believe that they're going to use the pre-Mists of Pandaria sort of cycle here. And if you don't know what that was, is the release of big posts which go into detail about individual changes that are coming to the game, and they can explain them fully and they can word it properly, and it's not done in a presentation style and certainly not in a Q&A. I don't think Blizzard really likes doing the Q&A stuff because things like what we're about to talk about can be misinterpreted very easily. When it's a written post, they can spend time like making sure the wording is absolutely crystal clear and doesn't get people confused. So the big piece of information, of course, is the WoW Chakra interview when asked about the release date. Obviously, they never mentioned it at BlizzCon is when we are going to get it. All we did get a mention of is that the beta or the alpha will start early Q1 next year. And speaking from experience, typically that means that's 6 to 7 months away from release. That means we are looking at a long time with Argus. Yeah? Pretty long. A long time with Argus and Antorus. Which is going to disappoint some people, but I think a lot of that comes down to, I want the new expansion now. I finished what I want to do. I want to do the new expansion now. But many others will, of course, be pissed that maybe it's looking like a year before we actually get Battle for Azeroth. And what are they going to be doing in the meantime? And that's the big question, is are they going to produce more content? Will we get some form of mini-raid like we did with the Ruby Sanctum and Halion? Or what else are they going to do? Well, we have some clues now, which is great. We actually have some clues as to what they're going to be doing. They are going to be using story and preparing for Battle for Azeroth. Now, I have to be a little bit careful here, and I'm going to say it right now. Be careful of the comment section down below, because there is a fair chunk of leaked information about what is about to happen in Antorus, which is going to be a part of what's going to happen over the next few months. So to avoid that spoiler, just be careful of the comment section. I won't really mention it. Now, what we're saying here is, instead of releasing some content, because Ian or Watcher seemed a little bit like, we don't really want to do another Ruby Sanctum Halion. It's not that fun, and plus it tends to get chewed up in about a day. It's not worth the amount of effort we put into making it to actually bring it into the game. Certainly if it's going to be a one boss deal like an Onyxia style or a Halion, is the guilds just go in and they smash it and that's it. It's done. It's not, the amount of development time to create such content is nowhere near worth what people are going to get out of it. So what it seems that they are going to be doing is providing context and building the setting for the Battle for Azeroth. So let's talk about that for a minute, and then we'll talk about whether that's going to be worthwhile or not. So what we're talking about here is, we now know that there are going to be some prelim things you're going to need to do in order to unlock the allied races when they come in the Battle for Azeroth. And they're obviously a very big deal. I would actually say, from everything we've seen from Battle for Azeroth, the idea of the allied races has actually been the #1 thing that has been announced. Like, just the fact that the trolls can stand up and the orcs aren't hunched over, and we might have really cool void elves, and the dark iron dwarves has actually been the most prominent announcement they've made that people have latched onto and love so much. Cosmetics are everything now in World of Warcraft. Cosmetics are absolutely everything, even over gameplay. Like, the gameplay stuff, people just seem to half listen to. The amount of confusion I've seen with regards to Warfronts and the island stuff. People think it's pure PvP. People don't think it's got difficulty levels. All this kind of stuff people half engaged with. Whereas the vast majority of people just were like, I could be a troll that stands up. Oh my god, that's amazing. And they know everything about them, and they know, they don't even care about their racials, I think. A lot of you ask randomly what the racials are of the new allied races. Most people are going to go, I don't know. I just like the way they look, right? It's a cosmetic thing, and that seems to be working out well. So we do know we're going to get some prelim stuff. Like, you need Exalted with the high-mounted Tauren before you can move on with unlocking the new funky guys with the paints and the totems on their back. They're going to also be introducing story and setting for some more allied races as the patches roll out throughout the remainder of Legion. And this is going to be questionable as to whether or not this is actually going to be enough to keep people engaged. I know for me personally, the idea of, say, doing Argus for the next 9-10 months, that's not that appealing. That's not that appealing. Will Antorus be enough to carry that kind of period of time? I don't know, unless they've made it incredibly difficult. And we did have word from the developers that Antorus will be... There'll be no boss as difficult as Kill Jaden. So maybe they're looking at the end boss being as difficult as something like Fallen Avatar. I'm talking about Mythic here, or whatever relevance you associate to what difficulty you encountered in Tomb of Sargeras and indeed later Nighthold. That's unlikely to carry you for that amount of time. Hopefully we won't be going back to something like the Emerald Nightmare, but you get the idea is that there's likely to be some difficulty in there, but nothing as bad as what we have seen in the Tomb of Sargeras. But that remains to be seen. That remains to be seen. They've said that before, and then suddenly it's like, oh god, this is horrific, this is horrible. There might be story coming for the Void Elves in 7.3.5, and that also means there might be story leading up to the different allied races that they can sort of dribble out, they can trinkle it out over the next coming months to keep people engaged. On top of that, considering the sheer lack of information we got at BlizzCon, now some of you might say lack of information, yeah, compared to a lot of expansion announcements, we got a very, very small amount of information about the Battle for Azeroth. It was mainly focused on like 3 features. It was the neck, it was the warfronts, it was the islands. That's pretty much it. They did 2 panels that were dedicated to that information. That's not a great deal when you consider, if you look at the Wrath of the Lich King announcements, when you look at Mists of Pandaria's announcements, when you look at Kata's announcements, and even Warlords of Draenor and Legion. You know, we had Demon Hunters coming, we had a whole host of new things that they were talking about. This time, not so much. They were very vague on it, which is why I haven't done a great deal of videos, because there wasn't a lot of information to talk about, honestly. What they could do now, and what I believe they're going to do, is the Mists of Pandaria style announcements, which is pretty much every month we got a massive post by the lead dev. So in this case, it would probably be Ian, but last time it was Ghostcrawler, which went in depth on certain changes that were going to happen in Mists of Pandaria, their feelings behind it, their thoughts behind it, what's going to affect us, how that's going to work out, rather than stand on a stage and potentially be misinterpreted, which is something Blizzard really hates. And they were steadfast at BlizzCon about making sure that, one, they never said never. That must be the golden rule of all things. Never said never, and didn't give any specifics. In fact, they caveated nearly everything they said with, this is not finished yet. Don't read too much into it. It might change. You know, please don't shoot me in the balls if this is slightly different, because we tend to latch onto facts and we tend to latch onto sentences. If they do it in a written post and explain it that way, they can spend a lot of time making sure the wording is 100% clear, and clarity is everything when it comes to a rabid fan base like we have for World of Warcraft. We need absolute clarity in terms of intention and design, and hopefully we can go forward from there. Now, the question is, and actually I was talking to Andy before we recorded this video, is if they are looking to do story mode content. So let's say it's going to be a really good idea, and it's going to be something like Suramar, where they have regular pieces of story-based content that are very engaging, very interesting, something we want to do. They have mini scenarios, mini in-game cutscenes, all these kind of things that are leading us from the thing that's about to happen in Antorus all the way for setting up for, obviously, the burning of Teldrassil, which is where we know we're going. We've got to get from A to B, right? This is what they look at in there. It's like, we've got to get from here and we've got to get to there. How can we do that while setting up the allied races and preparing for the battle, and perhaps incentivizing people to start caring now about the Horde Alliance war? That's what we want to be doing. So how are we going to do that? We can't do that with some sort of random PvE encounter. What we can do is provide mini bits of content which are actually much easier to make, and then set about getting people to get involved in that and do that. The issue we have there, and it was the first thing Andy said to me actually, was that if they do that, there's not much reason for me to keep my sub going, because I can come back at a later date when it's all unlocked back to back, and I can go through it that way and maybe even have a better experience. And there's no denying that. If you did the Suramar quest generally on a Tuesday, I think it was in the EU, on a Tuesday we would get a quest. It'd take about 10-15 minutes to do, and then you were done for the week, and then the story carried on the next week. Whereas if you started the quest now, It's all back to back. You're doing this entire storyline in a video game, which is a much more engaging experience. Similar with Argus, as somebody who played through the Argus storyline back to back on the PTR, and I'm on record as saying this in videos, is this was really, really good. This was a ton of fun. But when they gated it and broke it up in the actual live version of Argus, it was far less interesting because you were doing sort of 10, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes sometimes of story, which was great, and having a decent cutscene, and we are our scars and whatnot. And then suddenly it was broken up for another week, and then you kind of like forgot certain bits, and then you're coming back and you're trying to pick up the story like a book that you've not read for a while, and then you're like, who's this character? What's going on here? For those of us who aren't majorly into the lore. Is it going to be enough? That's the question I put to you guys. It's not for me to answer whether it's enough, because it's going to be entirely down to your own opinion. Is that going to be enough as if they're sort of trickling out bits of story and leading us up to it? Is that going to be enough when the actual gameplay loop remains Argus and Taurus over the coming months? Now, what I can say from our point of view as a channel is, of course, hopefully, we never expect to, but hopefully we will have access to the alpha and the beta, in which case we will be playing some Battle of Azeroth and getting as much information out for you as possible, doing all the class looks, checking out all the nooks and crannies, and obviously providing as much feedback as we can alongside you guys to Blizzard to hopefully get the best game experience we can. It's worked well for us in the past. We've got changes in to Legion that benefited everybody. So we'll be doing that. But similarly, I would give a shout out here, and yeah, this is a little bit selfish because it's something we do quite regularly now, is think about playing other games alongside it. I know that seems like blasphemy to so many people, but if you're bored, you should be playing other things. It's also a good reason why Classic's coming, is this is the kind of time where you would go and play Classic more than likely, because of the content drought currently in game. So I'd recommend that you go and check out other things alongside WoW instead of being angry at WoW because they have to make the new game. Ultimately, I don't blame them for this. The timing could have been better, maybe, but the timing could have been better, but it's not unsurprising that they're going to take this long to get a brand new expansion out and hopefully get it right. So that's my thoughts on it. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.